Welcome to our second Advocate Q&A video series. My name is Véronique Théberge. I'm a brain injury survivor and SameYou's digital campaign coordinator. As a bit of background on SameYou, well, the charity was co-founded by Emilia Clarke, who experienced 2 brain aneurysms during the filming of Game of Thrones, and her mom, Jenny Clarke. Following Emilia sharing a story in the New York Times, we've seen literally thousands of people write to us and share their own brain injury stories. Many of the stories that we receive highlight gaps experienced during their brain injury. So one of the first steps to raising awareness around the importance of such a pathway is to amplify our voices. In order to help grow this movement, we've reached out to people within the brain injury community, which brings me to today's guest for our Advocate Q&A, Daniel MacQueen. Dan was 28 when he had his brain injury, and he's using his rehabilitation journey as a stepping stone to inspire others to change their perspective after brain injury and develop resilience in the face of setbacks. So Dan, on behalf of the whole SameYou team, a big welcome, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you on board as a SameYou advocate. For those who may not have come across your story yet, I was wondering if you could give us a snapshot of your brain injury story.
Yeah, for sure, Veronica. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd be happy to dive into my story. It all happened in jolly old London, England, where SameYou's based, in 2014. So I've been having these headaches that were getting persistently worse. I went to A&E once. They thought it was vertigo. They sent me home. But later that day, I went on the tube. Now the tube's how you get around London. All those people in London will know that. I was picking up something from my friend in Notting Hill, and the headaches got so bad I couldn't see. My vision went black. And I got off the tube, and on the platform, I realized, something was really wrong here. I went back to A&E the next day. They thought it was vertigo. They sent me home. But they told me on the way out, if the headaches were to persist, I could always get my eyes checked at an optometrist. So I decided I was going to go get my eyes checked at an optometrist the next day because the headaches were pounding and just crazy painful. I was midway through the exam when the optometrist, Mr. Patel, he stopped the exam. He excused himself from the room, and he came back a few minutes later with a sealed envelope. He told me to go directly to Moorfields Hospital, which I did. Well, tell a lie. I didn't go directly there. I stopped at home first to grab a book, a bite to eat, and a phone charger. Then I made my way to Moorfields Hospital. They ran the same test and escorted me up to Charing Cross Hospital. It turns out I had a dangerous buildup of pressure in my brain caused from a non-cancerous cyst in my head. It turns out I required emergency brain surgery tomorrow.
Wow.
Turns out my world's about to change altogether. So some frantic messages were exchanged with my folks back in Canada, and I found myself on the operating table when Mom was flying to London. On the operating table, I had a brain hemorrhage, a massive bleed in the brain. They think the cyst burst when they operated. The Mom lands and she finds out that I'm in critical condition. I was in a coma for 4 weeks, but I was in and out of consciousness for months after this. Things were dicey, touch and go. When all was said and done, I was learning how to walk, talk, and smile again. So that's kind of how things all kicked off, Veronica.
Wow, that's pretty scary, I'm assuming. How were your parents? Like you said, your mom flew over, so obviously she comes back and she comes to London and finds you, in a coma and in that state. So what was her first reaction? Because carers, have a big part to play as well in the whole brain injury story. So
Yeah, I mean, the prognosis was not looking good. Like, it was a few weeks of me being, on the knife's edge of like, am I going to make it or not? In the coma, they had to keep my core temperature down below 40 degrees. So I used ice blankets above and below me to keep my core temperature down. This led to violent shivering. My family says it's horrible to watch. So I can only imagine how difficult this was for my folks to navigate. My mom was there first. My dad and brother came out afterwards. But there was a few weeks there where it was looking really dicey, and I wasn't sure I'd make it out of this space. And I can only imagine how difficult that was for them to deal with. So I know they've told me it was very difficult to watch and to see, but I wasn't seeing it through their eyes. I was seeing it through my eyes, right? Which was at the state black and blue, you know?
So 4 weeks in a coma, and then what happens when you come out of the coma in terms of rehab and so on?
Yeah, well, I couldn't speak for the first little while because I had a tracheotomy in the coma to breathe. And my vocal cords were pretty fried. And the doctors initially told my parents, you know, he's not going to be able to talk again. And so I woke up from the coma and I'm trying to talk to my mom, dad, and brother around the bed, but I can't talk. And so I point to my brother, go, give me a pen and paper. And I write on the pen and paper, I go, get me out of here. And I show it to him and I go, you have to make this happen. But he's like, what do you want me to do with this, Dan? You can't, you're hooked up to 13 tubes and hoses, your one eye's wonky as hell. Like, we're not going anywhere, dude. Like, this is not happening. But I just thought this is expensive. I was a Canadian living in London, so luckily I was covered by the medical system under a European passport. I wasn't sure this would all be smooth and fast, right? I thought there would be some hiccups there with that. But I couldn't talk for the first few weeks, and I had a Kiwi nurse, ironically enough, who took me down to the park, and she got me talking by sitting me in front of these kids playing football across the park or soccer. And, you know, after talking to mom and dad, she kind of realized who I was and what my vibe was. And she goes, hey, Dan, those kids across the park, they don't think you're good enough to talk, Dan. They don't think you're good enough to talk. And, you know, I found my voice. I shouted some profanities across the park. How dare you speak to me this way? You have no idea who I am, what I'm capable of. And I found my voice. But, like, she found out what motivated me and she hammered that. I'm just saying, like, don't judge the motivation. If it comes from a spiteful place or like a proven to wrong place, like, embrace it, ride the wave. You can't conjure up motivation, but you can harness and ride that wave. So I talk about now I'm trying to transition that spiteful way of becoming motivated to now helping people, lending a hand service. And that's a big part of my vibe. And that's why I'm speaking now, is because I want to help pave the way, because I don't want you to go through what I went through. And not to make it seem like I'm some sage person with all this advice, but like, I would have killed to have this kind of knowledge when I was going through this experience. And like, I want to kind of give that to you because I had a lot of help and maybe you don't have that help. And I'm trying to give that help to you if I can.
You found your voice and you want to make the most of it, essentially, right?
Yes.
So in your talks, because Dennis does amazing speech, you talk a lot about resilience, and I've also noticed that you often sign your emails or social posts by adding the words "one step at a time." Can you expand on how this came to be, and I guess the importance of those 5 words, and what they mean for you?
Yeah, thank you, Veronique. That's a good observation you made there. We have a tendency in life sometimes to look at the big macro and like, well, how can I get there? It's so far away. The top of the hill is so far away. But like, that's not how you get to the top of the hill. You get to the top of the hill by focusing on the next step. What's right in front of your face? Like, what can you control what's in front of your face? Focus on the next step. And the next step and the next step. There's this great quote from a book called, I'm going to butcher this now, so please excuse me, but the boy, the fox, the horse, and the mole. And a boy, yells back at a horse. He goes, I can't see a way through. And the horse goes, can you see your next step? And the boy goes, yes. And the horse goes, well, just take that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's an example of like, you can't see the way through the reeds of the forest always, but you can see your next step. And if you take that next step, it opens up more. Every step you take opens up more. So the key for that is to really aim for a small hittable target, hit that, and then go for the next one. Don't get too stressed out about a big achievable target, which you may or may not be able to hit, but like, make it small enough so you can hit it. So one step at a time is a reminder that, you know what, that's what you got to focus on. What can you control in your face, in front of your face? One step at a time.
I'm just wondering because I remember people telling me that in the early days of my recovery. But did you find it easy to get in that vibe of just focusing on the, next step? Because I know that was a real struggle for me. I just wanted to be who I was before. And those simple steps didn't feel significant enough, I suppose. So I'm just wondering how it was for you, if it's something you grew into, or if, from early on you adapted that sort of mindset.
That's a great question, Veronica. And no, it was not easy. It was more frustrating than anything else in my life. I used to play a lot of sports. I could do everything. I could, run, play soccer, volleyball, softball. Like I could play everything. And I was in a wheelchair when I got out of the hospital, right in the coma. And to think like, well, I want to be back doing some big stuff, right? And like it takes me 45 minutes to get in a wheelchair, then 40, then 35. And I'm thinking, this is not cool. But you only get forward by focusing on a small hittable target. Like, well, let's make it 35 today and get in the wheelchair at 35, and then make it 30, and then 25. And you slowly inch your way back up. And then I'm doing this, then I'm walking into Broadway. And walking without a wheelchair, walking without a crutches or cane, you got to slowly build this up, but it takes time to build this up. And it's not easy to take the time to do this, and it takes acceptance. Acceptance is one of the biggest parts of my talk that I really want to stress for your audience. And that's why you can't take steps forward unless you accept what happened to you, right? You can't accept your lot. So like, I used to play a lot of sports, but like now I'm in a wheelchair. If you don't accept that fact, you can't make it down to 30 minutes, then 25, then 20, then 15, then 10, then 5. If you don't accept that, you're just woe is me. It's not fair. You're not wrong. It's not fair. But like, that doesn't get you forwards. That doesn't get you forwards. You're just going to be spinning your tires there wishing like, well, this shouldn't happen to me. Like, you're right. It shouldn't have happened to you. But guess what? It did. So acceptance is key. And that took a long time to get to that acceptance where like one step at a time was okay for me. But that is one of the biggest unlocks I can give you in your audience.
So you know how we often describe brain injury recovery as a roller coaster. So were you able to apply that same mindset, when you go 2 step forwards, 3 step backs, or, when you have, a crash or a setback? So how did you come back from those setbacks that can be sometimes, quite important setbacks too?
Yeah, the whole thing's a bloody roller coaster. It was and mine's maybe a bit more pronounced than most. Like I was plodding along through recovery for a year, doing recovery, back to work like 2 half days a week, 3 half days a week. After a year of rehab, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, I was just getting back to work. And I had a second setback, Veronica. And by setback, I mean I was found unconscious in my flat by my mom. I was shunted in my head from the first brain injury, called a VP shunt, that had blocked leading to hydrocephalus or water on the brain. What had happened was I used to be my mom with the tube before I jumped on the tube to grab to work. I didn't show up one day and she was a bit worried, so she went to my flat and she found me unconscious on the floor. So I was rushed to the hospital, woke up in the hospital, 12 hours later, hearing the beeping noise of the heart rate monitor going off. Beep, beep, beep. What happened, guys? What happened? Well, Dan, you had a second brain injury. The shunt that's in your brain had blocked. We had to go in for emergency brain surgery. And I go, well, all my progress has been washed away. And they go, well, we got the blockage. But I've been working for a year to get back to work. Like a year, like grinding to get back to work, a life of normalcy. I describe my recovery like a W shape. So like a roller coaster, but like a W. So the first setback to the first tip of the W, right? I climb back to work and maybe halfway back up. And the second setback happens. It's not where the first one was, much lower. I call this the depths of the human experience, where your dreams and hopes are snickered at by, fate or this injury, and well, you thought you had a chance there, bud. Ha ha ha. We'll drag you back down to rock bottom here. We got you here, bud. You're not going anywhere. I'd already done rehab, so I wasn't entitled to do that. My mom had to fight tooth and nail to get me back to some sort of support from the hospital after this. This was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was that second setback. Because I had been working for a year to get back to work and making progress and slow gains, but slow progress was happening. I was starting to turn the corner on this space. And then it gets ripped from underneath you, man. I was so low after that. So yeah, I understand the roller coaster very well. And the acceptance piece is so big with this. I was able to make steps forward when I accepted that this happened to me. It wasn't fair that it happened to me, but guess what? Sometimes stuff that's not fair happens. You got to ask yourself a question, and what? What would you like to have happen to help you through this now? What do you expect to have happen?
Mhm.
You ask that question, and what, a few times, and you run out of excuses of what can happen here. So that and what question is so key for this. And I realized that, like, I got to accept what happened to me and take steps to progress myself. I already done rehab once before, so I knew how to rehab faster and better. So I could do this better than I had last time. And that took a while to come to terms with that. But like when I made that switch, I just kept accelerating and pulling away from the injury and climbing myself back up. So now I've got like a blueprint for how to adapt to setbacks and hardship, how to foster resilience. And that's just by doing the work and accepting what happened to you and taking steps to progress yourself. Because wishing something didn't happen. Wishing something didn't happen is not an adequate way to resolve it. You're not taking any steps forward. You're just spinning your tires. And then 3 months down the road, when you say, you know, I guess I should take a step forward, you could have been taking steps forward every day, but you chose to be whinging about it. So that's the message I try to bring forward to survivors and people that are going through hard times. Is just, you know, acceptance is tough to hear, but it's the first step in progressing yourself.
So when you had that big setback, so you would have been 29, 30 then?
29, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in awe because I remember how I was when I was 29, and I guess hardship does bring a lot of wisdom. But when you go through significant setback like you did, you also know how hard you will have to work, to work your way back up, I suppose. So, how much support did you have, like, to help you keep motivated d during that time?
Yeah, great question, Veronica. I had a ton of support. My mom and dad came over from Vancouver. They were out for like 2 years to help me back with rehab and all the noise with that. Friends came over from Vancouver to kind of cheer me along and support me. And that made a big difference because I'd see them in the hospital and be like, you know what, I want to show you I'm trying here. A friend of mine, Claire, she came over to visit me and visit me in London for a few days. And then she went up to Scotland to visit a friend. And she came back down. And in that time, I was out of the wheelchair and walking on the Zimmer frame, but I was walking because I wanted to show her I was trying here. I wanted to show her I was worthy of the praise she was giving me. And that was such a big part of this, was just prove people right who backed me and prove people wrong that said I couldn't do something. So I had a ton of support to get back to where I'm at today, Veronica, a ton of support. And that's why I'm so driven to kind of share what I've learned, because maybe you don't have that support. And like, if you don't have that support, maybe you don't get back to where I'm at today.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I guess the challenges I think through recovery are constantly evolving and changing. We're never, finished recovering, I suppose. That's what I'm trying to say here. So, I mean, what would be some of the ongoing challenges that you have, and have you, how do you mitigate them and tackle them?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, it's, as you know, like Branger, you're never out of the woods. Every day, armor up. By armor up, I mean I get a good night's sleep. I wake up early, I go exercise, I go for a walk, I go to the gym, I go for a swim, I get a sweat on. Mood follows action. I have a shower and the shower cold. I meditate for 20 minutes. I armor up for the day. Every day armor up, because I'm on a nice edge every day with like being ahead of this injury or behind the injury. And if I don't do that, I can falter, stumble, and not my best self. Every day you got to wake up and face the music and face the reality of, like, you know what, you're living with a brain injury and you got to do these things to like mitigate the downside. And that's like, it's tiresome to do, but like you have to do it. If you don't do it, you stumble, you falter. I'm reminded of this like just a couple weeks ago. I don't need to meditate today or do this. I got ahead of myself, or too big for my bridges maybe. And I had a bit of like a mini, not a total mess up, but like I just could see myself stumbling or faltering, and I'm like, I shouldn't do that. I'm better than this. I can be better than that. only by doing the routine that I'm better at. So get a morning routine that serves you is my recommendation to stay ahead of the curve. But every day you wake up, you got to be ready to fight the battle and face the music.
Hmm. I mean, routine definitely works. That's what I feel as well in my personal brain injury recovery. That's all very nice, like when you're at home, but when you travel and go places, do you manage to stick to that routine? And if so, what are your tips that you could share with us?
I think the biggest thing is sleep. I need to sleep, otherwise I'm not my best self. I've got this strap, this Whoop strap, which is I'm not associated or affiliated with them in any way, but like it's something that I track my sleep and recovery with. And I'm pretty religious with this because it lets me know how I can stride myself for the day. I really need to moderate this and make sure that I'm, pushing myself when I can and resting when I need to. Sleep is the first, second, and third most important thing in this. And if I don't sleep well, I need to sleep well. So like if I'm out traveling, I'll just maybe build in some naps along the day because I'm in a new environment. And a new environment's a lot more strain on the brain, right? I also have double vision, which is, a lot of strain on the brain as well. Like I can't be around new stuff all the time because my brain's got two images it's trying to compute the whole time. And that's very taxing on the brain. So you got to kind of really moderate yourself and not stretch yourself too thin. Um, but I think just being self-aware as best you can about how your fatigue levels are, and going for a coffee break, going for a little meditation, take a little break off. Like don't go into the strain all the time. Kind of try to loosen the load if you can a little bit. I think being self-conscious or self-aware is the most important thing with that.
Yeah, those are all very good tips and good points. And again, like it's creating those habits, like you were saying, you know when you can push, but at the end of the day, will that little push that you will have done have been supporting how your day is going to go along, or are you best to take 5 minutes? Sometimes just 5 minutes, eyes off the screen, you grab a glass of water, and it's sort of like a reset for the brain. But getting those habits in place, takes time, I guess. Like we don't pick that up from the get-go. It's after, trial and errors and figuring out what works best for us, and then, like you were saying, implementing that in a consistent manner.
Yeah, and this is through trial and error that you learn this. Like I've failed many times, but rarely do I fail at the same thing twice. I have, but rarely is the same thing twice. Usually I'll learn. Not always. Sometimes it takes two or three times to fail, but like, well, don't push in this space because you tried to do that and you crumpled and failed. And like when you fail with the brain injury, with the fatigue, it's like, oh, the regret that you have by like maybe something you said or just like the way you showed up or just a bit snippy or a bit aggravated. Like the shame is quite embarrassing because you're like, oh, my old self didn't do that. Like I used to be better than this. Like I was more socially aware, but it's like you got to just respect the brain injury. Like you can't
Yeah.
get too worked up about this. Like just respect your vibe, respect your battery, and like get on with it.
Are there occasions where you feel that you want to push, or you know that something's going to be taxing for your brain battery, but for you, the payoff of doing so is more important than, say, a setback that might come from it? Are there times that you've experienced that?
Yeah, like social situations. I say like if I've got a show or some like social event and like I'm tired and I want to take a nap, but I'm like, you know what, you really gotta push through this to make it to the event. And sometimes I'll go to the event and be like, hey man, do you mind if I take 5, 15 minutes to chill out in the room here, just kind of refresh myself? That helps. Having friends that kind of know your situation and kind of look out for you, that's helpful as well. But I think just being self-aware of like what your body needs and just being receptive to that. You can't try to push through because when you try to push through, you fail. Like you can't beat this. Like fatiguing is a big thing. At work, when I used to work at Hootsuite, sometimes I would push myself too hard and I would be at the desk and I'd literally crumple over the desk and someone would wake me up and I'd be like, oh, so sorry. Like you go for a walk and grab a fika. And a fika is a coffee break from Sweden. So I'd be pretty famous for these in Hootsuite that I go take for fika breaks and I go for a coffee, a treat, a walk, some fresh air. Because I would fatigue at the desk sometimes and it wouldn't be a good look. And I need those breaks to kind of stretch out my day.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just getting towards the end of the Q&A here, but when we reached out to you, Dan, about, becoming a SameYou advocate, you did not hesitate for one moment, and you were really keen, to find out more. And yeah. Um, so you are, a keen advocate on behalf of the brain injury community, and you do lots, within, but also outside the brain injury community. And I was wondering if you could expand on why advocating for better brain injury rehab is important to you.
Because this is difficult. This is, if you're in this right now, it's difficult. And it's so hard and you can't see a way through and you're not sure you can get a way through this. I wasn't sure I'd make it out of this alive. There were times I was holding on for dear life and I wasn't sure I'd make it out alive. But I'm just going to keep going because maybe it will break. Maybe it will break. Maybe it will break. Every day I'm asking myself this question, will it break now? I don't know, not yet. Will it break now? No, not yet. But if you keep going, it breaks. It breaks. I'm telling you, it breaks. And I had a lot of help to get back to where I'm at today. I'm like, I want to kind of show you that, you can get through this, but you got to keep going. You got to take the next step. Doesn't matter if you can see the whole way through, just take the next step. That's why I'm passionate about this, because I mean, as you do as well, I have a lot of personal experience with this. And that's why I wanted to help and be an advocate for SameYou, because you can do this. You're stronger than you think. But you got to keep going and you got to take the next step with this.
Any final words or things you'd like to share with us before we wrap up the Q&A, Dan? Any topics you'd want to touch base on that are important to you? I know you do a lot of speaking, so that might be something you want to touch base on.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Veronica. I think, yeah, probably drawing attention to my speaking business, which is at MacQueenDan.com. You can see my demo reel there and any sort of talks I give, and getting bombarded by a bee here. That's what I'd like to push and kind of draw people towards to see. But I think the biggest message is you're stronger than you think. You're stronger than you think. And if you can embody that, along with take the next step or one step at a time, I think you're in a good space. My talks can, change your perspective on this experience, because I share my vibe and what I've experienced. And it's not to get the attaboys of like, whoa, look what I've been through. How do you like these apples? Mind you, a bit of that's probably, there's a bit of that in me, a bit of ego in there for sure. But to show you like, well, why should I listen to you? What are you talking about? And if I can show you what I've been through and where I'm at today, then maybe you go, hey, well, this worked for this guy. Why can't I do this? Mm-hmm. I did these tests, Veronique, a few months back at this brain injury clinic in Vancouver, to kind of see how my brain was after the brain hemorrhage, and wanted to see where I'm at compared to like a normal brain. My results came back and they were average, which I was a bit miffed by. I thought, there should be some, big outliers, big deficiencies, big spikes in like exceptional stuff, because I've recovered so well. So I labeled them as shockingly average, right? But the person who ran the test was like, well, this is a very healthy brain down. Like, you can't tell you got a brain injury at all. This is wonderful. I'm like, that's actually really cool, because it shows me that what I've been able to do has been my mindset and leaning into my mindset, full stop. Believing that with every core of my being, I've been able to lean in this, toes over the nose of my board, and dive into this perspective. But that means that I'm no better than you. That means I'm no smarter or no better than you, that you can do this as well. Which is why I'm so passionate to share this, because you can do this too. I know it's tough, but keep going. Take the next step. It's a bit of a rant there, Veronique, but yeah, speaking engagements as well.
One step at a time, eh?
Thank you.
Yeah. So then on behalf of the whole SameYou team, I'd like to say a huge thank you for sharing your time with us, and for providing a bit of insight on your brain injury experience and how you've approached it, in your life going forward. So we've talked about different ways in which we would collaborate going forward, and Dan's offered to share a few tips on brain injury hacks with us. So I'd invite you to watch this space. In case you aren't following Dan already, could you let people know where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, for sure. I think LinkedIn and Instagram, Dan MacQueen on LinkedIn, and
Yep.
MacQueen Dan, MacQueen, Dan, on Instagram would be great.
And then there's your website that you've mentioned earlier as well. I'll make sure that we put it in the description.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I guess I'd like to thank you all for listening for to this episode of SameYou's Advocate Q&A. Again, massive thank you to Dan. If you'd like to support SameYou, I suppose one of the easiest way to do so is really by trying to join our movement. So I'd like to invite you to hop on our website, and if you click on the join us, that helps us amplify our voices and share the message around the importance of developing a better rehab for those affected.